Welcome to the GameRamble video review for TankBlitz, narrated by me, DarkCloud. As always, the full text version of this review can be found on the GameRamble website linked below. Also, please keep in mind that this review was originally published in 2017. The TLDR is that you have a hankering for jumping into a tank and blasting everything in your path to smithereens, then TankBlitz has got you covered. This 2D top-down shooter looks and feels like an arcade game from the 90s, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's got non-stop action, tons of different enemies to shoot at, and enough upgrades to keep you coming back for more. 3 difficulty levels and many achievements add to the replay value, but we would have loved to see more than 12 levels. Nevertheless, the game was entertaining from start to finish, and we had a blast with it. Gameplay receives a 9 out of 10. You shoot things to earn cash for upgrades so that you can do it all again with even more powerful weapons. Graphics receives a 7 out of 10. The visuals are not as sharp as we would have liked in high resolution, but they are packed with detail. Sound receives an 8 out of 10. The game features no speech, but the effects sound like they've been plucked straight from an arcade. The overall score for TankBlitz is 8 out of 10. And now for the full review. You'd have to be pretty desperate to trust an asylum patient named Johnny Psycho with a $1 billion prototype tank, but that's just what the military does in TankBlitz. While they consider Johnny somewhat delusional due to certain incidents such as trying to take on a battleship with just his tank, he is still the most skilled tank commander they've ever had. The reason why the military is even considering letting Johnny out of the asylum and near the expensive hardware is an extremist calling himself Hannibal. In addition to being wanted for crimes against humanity, Hannibal has also taken over a small island nation in the Pacific, where he's busy constructing a small army. As Johnny, you're given control of a tank and sent out on your own to take down Hannibal by any means necessary. TankBlitz is a game that clearly doesn't take its story very seriously, but it does provide a rather humorous excuse to go on a rampage. Thankfully, it takes its action very seriously, so you can expect plenty of mayhem in the 12 levels, spread out over 4 chapters. Initially, you only have access to one tank, the Venom, but as you make progress, 3 additional ones become available. Each tank has its own strengths and weaknesses, but while they all have the same primary weapons, they all have different special upgrades. While 12 levels might not sound like much, you can replay each one as many times as you want, and there are 3 difficulty levels to choose from, which can be adjusted before starting a level. Selecting a higher difficulty rewards you with more cash and war bonds, the 2 commodities used to upgrade your tanks in this game. You'll definitely want to replay a few levels, as not only is it a lot of fun to return to earlier levels with a more powerful tank, but you'll also need all the cash you can get to upgrade your vehicle fully. TankBlitz is an arcade-style blaster viewed from a top-down perspective, so don't expect anything resembling realism. Instead, you have 50 different types of enemies, all with a single purpose, turning your tank into a smoking pile of scrap. Along the way, you'll also encounter a few bosses who will try to stop you dead in your tracks. However, after a few upgrades, your enemies won't know what hit them, as you turn your tank into a nimble bullet and missile spewing weapon of mass destruction. Visually, TankBlitz reminds us of early arcade games, and also brought back some fond memories of the sensible software classic Cannon Fodder. Unfortunately, when played on a large high-resolution monitor, the graphics tend to become a little fuzzy. The game only provides the option to play windowed or in full screen, so there appears to be no way to adjust the resolution manually. You can also choose between low, medium and high graphics, or allow the game to auto-adjust the graphics quality for optimal performance. Tucked away behind the advanced settings menu is the option to tweak anti-aliasing, particles and enable features such as dynamic shadows, persistent debris, track marks and screen shake. Maxing out everything does make the game look better, but it won't be enough to impress gamers expecting cutting-edge visuals. A closer look does reveal a lot of neat touches though, such as enemy soldiers going down in puddles of blood, buildings getting blown to bits, and some great enemy vehicle designs. The character designs used for the comic book style cutscenes are also quite nice, and while not exactly state of the art, the visuals definitely have charm. It's rather hard to judge the game's soundtrack, as there's usually so much gunfire and explosions happening at all times that the music is lost in the noise. This is not necessarily bad for an action-packed game like TankBlitz, and the audio levels can be adjusted by players who prefer to tone down the sound effects in favor of the music. It's a pity that the game doesn't feature any speech, as at some points during missions characters will pop up with things to say, but usually there's too much shooting going on to read what it is. The controls are straightforward, with WASD taking care of your tank movement, while the mouse is used for aiming and shooting. Using the scroll wheel, you can switch between your 4 weapons on the fly, and the keyboard activates special abilities. While the game's pace is frantic, you can't just hold down the fire button and blow up everything in your path either. Firstly, your weapons all have limited ammunition, and secondly, each of your primary weapons requires you to pay attention to how you use them. The longer you fire the machine gun, the faster it shoots, but without a break to cool down, it will overheat and briefly jam. Conversely, the cannon has to be manually reloaded after a few shots, which requires you to hit the fire button at just the right time. Failure results in the cannon briefly jamming, while success rewards you with a supercharged shot. Even the mortar requires you to keep an eye on a small indicator to land your shot successfully. It can be tricky to keep track of all of this in the heat of battle, but it becomes second nature with time. Completing missions and destroying enemies rewards you with cash, which can be spent on the many upgrades available for each of your tanks. These range from boosting your primary weapons to other aspects such as health, engines, tracks, armor, targeting and more. Unfortunately, not everything can be bought with cash, as some upgrades require war bonds. These are only earned by successfully fulfilling specific criteria, like completing a mission on a more challenging difficulty level or earning achievements. The good news is that ordinary cash can be exchanged for war bonds, at a rate of $10,000 for 10 war bonds, so you won't have to grind too much to get the upgrades you want. Speaking of upgrades, each tank has some unique ones that ensure you'll want to take them all for a spin. So while the Venom only has heat-seeking missiles and extra starting ammo as upgrade options, the other tanks gets much more interesting. Take the Tempest, which can be upgraded to self-repair while shooting, or replace the bullets in your minigun with lasers that don't consume any ammo as long as your shields are intact. Then there's the Mammoth, which can be equipped with nuclear missiles, and the Zenith, which has space for its own Tesla tower. Thanks to these upgrades, we kept playing the game long after defeating the final boss, and continue to have a blast returning to earlier levels and conquering them on higher difficulty settings. At the end of the day, TankBlitz is not the longest or best looking game in the genre, but there's no denying the sheer entertainment it offers. We would have loved to see a few more levels, or some sort of randomization to make returning to previous levels a little less predictable, but despite this, the game is still a lot of fun. It's definitely one of those titles that are easy to pick up and play, but once you're hooked, there's no stopping until you've aced every level and fully upgraded every tank. Thanks for joining me for this TankBlitz PC review. Remember to like, subscribe and share. Until next time.